So when I was in college, I took a class on psychology, and one of our assignments was that we had to perform a psychology experiment on so many people. And so they had a rule: you had to do an experiment. It had to have at least um, 50 like points of data. Okay, and so for my experiment. I went, and it was a group experiment. We went to test something, and so we went to a popular spot, and we were asking people questions. And so here's what we would do: we would go to a group of people and be like, "Hey, excuse me, can I interview you?" And sometimes they would say no. And so then I would go to somebody else and be like, "Hey, can I interview you?" And they would say yes, because Joseph can't say no to me. And so they would say yes, and then we would start the interview. But here was the thing: for half of the group, for 25 of the people, we conducted the interview like normal. It was just normal questions. It was just this thing. For the other half of the group, as we were in the middle of the interview, I would pull out my phone and start to check text messages. And then hey, what was that? Sorry, I missed that. Hold on. Give me 1 second. And while I was talking to them, I would stop and check messages and not listen to them giving their answer. Now, here's what was really interesting. What we found was that people who were under 30 were more likely to be okay with me pulling out my phone and checking a text message in the middle of the interview. In fact, when I pulled out my phone and was checking something, even though I had stopped them in the middle, they were like, "Oh, that looks important, you do that." And they waited for me to finish to get back to it. But some older people were very frustrated by this. And they were like, "You stopped me. You can't check your text messages right now. You made me stop." What's interesting is that to a group of some people, that was very dishonoring. To a group of another people, that was not dishonoring at all. But we live in a culture where a lot of people experience dishonor in many ways. How many of you think that you've been in a classroom that was disrespectful? You've been in a class of okay, all of you. How many of you think? And this isn't self-reporting. You might be talking about your sibling. How many of you have been in a house where somebody showed disrespect? And you could actually say it was my little sister, but that's whatever. Okay, so we live in kind of a time where we recognize that there's disrespect, but I want to read you a quote from somebody who looked at the culture and was like, "Oh my goodness, we live in such a disrespectful, dishonoring culture." Let me read this to you. He said this. He said, "The children now love luxury, like easy, wealthy, just kicking it." He says they have bad manners. They have contempt for authority. They disrespect their elders. They talk when they should be listening. Children are tyrants. They don't serve in their house. They don't stand up when older people walk into the room. They contradict their parents. They talk too much in front of guests. They eat all the food at the table. They cross their legs, and they're cruel to their teachers. All right, how many of you feel like that some of that is partially true? Okay, does that describe today? You feel like it describes today a little bit? Now, here's what I love about this. That was not a quote from anybody who has lived in the last 2,400 years. In fact, that quote comes from ancient Greece. It was a guy named Socrates, and he was complaining about, he was like, "Boy, the kids these days." Now, you know what's really interesting to me about that is probably many of us think that our time is a time that's really disrespectful, but disrespect is really old. Say how old? I don't actually have an end to that joke. It's so old, though. Disrespect is really, really old. But here's the thing. Dishonor and disrespect, though it may be old, though it may be something that has plagued a lot of generations, it doesn't have to be the way that followers of Jesus live. In fact, Jesus calls us to a different way, which is why in JVox today we are going to talk about how in here we are honoring. And I'm excited to talk about who we honor and how we honor. But before we do, I want to know how you guys view different parts of disrespect. And so here's what we have at your table in the red baskets. We have a list of scenarios, and we're going to lay those out on your table. You're going to talk about them at first, and then I want each person to rank your top 3 things that you think, oh my goodness, this is so disrespectful. So do that, and then we'll be back in a few. I walked around a little bit, and I heard some of y'all's answers. And so some people said making fun of others' mistakes was the worst. Some people saying talking back to your parents. And it wasn't just talking back. There was, over here, there was actually like screaming at parents. That's the ultimate. I didn't hear from over here, though. What did we come up with?
A lot of us said rolling eyes when
That's the worst. Okay, what did y'all? Talking back to parents or teachers. What did we have here? Is that the one? Taking someone's things without permission. Okay, now we understand this, but I don't know that we understand how severe it is. And here's what I mean. What we don't recognize some moments is that disrespect or dishonor is like cutting a tie with something extremely important. And how many of you have ever been like on a rock wall or anything like that? Anybody on a rock? Oh, look at what mountaineers we have in here. Okay, so here's the deal. If you've ever been on a rock wall where you have like the rope that you're attached to, you understand that rope is incredibly important because it connects you to what's above. But here's the deal. Now, some of you, I know you charge your phones like this. I've seen you. Yeah, you do this. But now here's the deal. Dishonor is like being down here and saying, hey, I don't need you up there, and chopping it. And what happens is you cut your whole support. I'm not going to do it. Some of you were so terrified. You were like, not the electronics. Don't do it. I wasn't going to. Anyway. But here's the deal. What happens when we dishonor is we cut the tie above us. And can I explain something? When dishonor occurs regularly and it cuts that tie, you lose the ability to gain wisdom from those above you. You lose the ability to learn from those above you. You begin to fall apart. And let me say something. If you look, I love history. In fact, ask me what the last book I read was. The last book I read was on Christian history in the non-Roman world. I mean, that's what I do for giggles. So here's the deal. I do love history, but when you look at history and you look at cultures and countries that begin to dishonor those around them or those above them, it's usually within one generation or 2 generations that the whole country begins to fail. And so this is actually a really big deal. It's such a big deal. I want to drive this home one more way. Have you ever heard of the Church of Satan before? Okay, some of you've heard of this. Okay, have you heard of the Satanic Bible before? Okay, some of you have. Now here's the deal. Just to be clear, both of those were created recently in history by a guy named Anton LaVey. And the Satanic Bible says it actually doesn't worship Satan. I don't know if you knew this. Like Satanism doesn't worship Satan. In the Satanic Bible, what it says is that you are your own God. And that the person you should honor most is yourself. Now, let me tell you why that's interesting. Because most people who exhibit dishonor are doing it because they want to honor themselves more than everybody else. Honor starts with us being like Jesus. What was Jesus like? Well, the Bible tells us that Jesus was humble, and he put others before himself. So in order to live like Jesus, we've got to be honoring like Jesus, and it starts from a place of humility. So who are we supposed to honor? There's a few people I want to talk real quickly. The first is that we honor the holy. Now, who is the holy? The Bible is going to tell us who the holy is. That there is only one who is perfectly holy, and that is God. I love that in the Bible, you'll read sometimes that there's a couple of moments where someone will repeat the same word twice. And if you were writing a paper for school and you wrote the same word twice in a row, most of the times you're going to get in trouble for that. You're going to get marked off. But the Bible is not making grammar mistakes. Sometimes you'll see something and it'll say, whoa, whoa. And you're like, whoa, whoa, why are we repeating this? The reason that they would do that was because that's the way that they would make you recognize something is being shouted. So if the Bible says, whoa, whoa, what it actually means is, whoa! That's what it means. Now, can I tell you something really wild? There's only one thing that is repeated 3 times back to back in the Bible. It's the phrase, holy, holy, holy. And it's the phrase that is spoken when people are in God's presence. And so when we read that, we go, holy, holy, holy. But actually, what's happening is people walk into God's presence and they go, holy! Because it's so amazing and it's such a big deal. And you don't react like that to anybody else. God alone is the most holy. God alone is worth all honor and all praise. And people can dishonor and disrespect God. The Bible actually says, it says to not put any other gods before him. It says to not replace him with an item. It says to not use his name as a free word. A lot of people curse with God's name. A lot of people put other things in God's place. God deserves our honor, our highest honor, our highest respect. So we honor the holy. We also honor the honorable. The people who have positions that deserve honor. The people who have positions that need to be honored. Here's what that means in the Bible. The Bible actually tells us who are the honorable. Who are those that are supposed to be in positions of authority. And this is your guys' favorite, absolute favorite. Get ready. The first position here is your parents. We honor our parents. We are honoring to our parents. And so when they say, hey, can you take out the trash? We don't go, When they say, hey, can you unload the dishwasher? We don't kick the cat. When they say, hey, it's time for dinner, you don't smash your video game controller into the TV. No, we are honoring. And here's why. Here's how the Bible explains it. The Bible says in Ephesians 6, if you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you'll have a long life on the earth. Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you know what? if we trust God, and I think most of you would say, I trust God, God always keeps his promises. And one of his promises is that those who honor their parents, he will make things go well for you. There's a blessing on the other side of honoring your parents. Now, here's the deal. I know your parents are weird. I get it. And I know some of you feel like you're like, my parents are especially weird. My parents are the weirdest. But let me tell you something. I don't think that's true. But the promise from God still stands that if you honor your parents in the Lord, there's a promise that he'll take care of you. So we honor our parents. We honor our spiritual leaders. Who is that? Those are your tag leaders. Look at your tag leaders right now. Hey, the Bible says to honor your spiritual leaders. In fact, one of my favorite verses says, make it easy on them. It says, make it easy on them because it doesn't help you at all if your tag leaders are absolutely exhausted by you. It says, listen, I've been to camps. I've been to youth camps where we've taken students, and there are students that break all the rules, that do all the things. And there's these moments where I wish that they could understand what God is trying to get to them, but because of their dishonor, they miss it. Dishonoring your leaders robs you of something. We honor the holy, we honor the honorable. And in J-Box, there's another important piece where we honor one another. The Bible says that every person was created in the image of God. Every person created in God's image, which means that each of us have something that is worth pausing for, listening to. It means that when somebody's at your table and they're chatting, and here's the deal, sometimes you come into J-Box from very different places. Somebody shows up and they've got hard stuff going on at home. And they're sitting at that table and they're just sharing and they're pouring their heart out and they're crying and snot's coming out of their nose. And then at the other end of the table, somebody's completely ignoring them making jokes. Right? But listen, God has called us to be honoring, and so we want to honor each other. The Bible says, be quick to listen, slow to speak. And some of us, our favorite pastime is speaking fast. Being the first to speak. The Bible says, be quick to listen. So J-Box, we honor our God, we honor the honorable, and we honor each other.